Coming up next, we're powering up the time machine to go back to a year of classic songs that will hit you with a powerful dose of nostalgia, including a beloved singer who turned the voices in his head into one of his most haunting masterpieces. Also a tale of forbidden love as a woman falls for a married superstar and sparks conflict behind the music. Plus the story of a mythical dragon that had everyone convinced it was truly sinister, and a song that was recorded during a fire burning inside the studio. They did it while the fire was raging. And what happened when a scrappy band with no money, no fame, and no idea recorded one of the most controversial and iconic songs of the rock era? A song that was under investigation by the government for decades. The countdown of the top 10 songs of a pivotal year coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you ever played mailbox baseball back in the day, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now, click the button and click the bell so you know when stuff comes out. Also, make sure to check out our podcast on Apple and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Rate us and follow us there. So today we're firing up the time machine and heading to a year of innocence and controversy. The year that we lost our beloved president and the year the Brits started invading the American charts. Talking about 1963. And kicking off the countdown of the top 10 songs of 63, it's an artist who often heard music in his sleep, including his legendary hit In Dreams, coming in at number 10.
My dreams of you.
Roy Orbison's Aching Ballad has such a surreal vibe to it. Almost sounds like it's drifting in from an imaginary world. I guess it kind of did. One night late in 62, Roy awoke in the middle of the night with a full melody and a story in his head. Most songwriters, might scramble for a tape recorder or scribble down a few lines to remember, but Roy didn't need to. He got up, sat down with his nearby guitar, and in just 10 minutes, the entire song was finished. Music, lyrics, arrangement, all from a dream. Strange cascading melody, the build-up to the soaring high notes, and the emotional gut punch of a man who finds love in his dreams only to lose it when he awakes. It was his purest expression of longing, and Roy delivered it with such an operatic drama. It broke all the rules of, pop music or structure. There was no conventional chorus, no repeated verse, just a linear story straight from the subconscious. Roy Orbison came over the song almost entirely in that dream, even motivating a radio DJ pre-announcing it as a new song by Elvis Presley. In Roy's dream, he saw a candy-colored clown that he cleverly tied into the folklore of the Sandman, the character that tiptoes into your room at night, sprinkling stardust and whispering that everything is going to be all right. Man, back in the 50s, early 60s, strange stuff.
Just to sprinkle stardust and to whisper, go to sleep.
The narrator falls asleep in a blissful dream state where he's with his lover, but when he wakes up, his lover's gone. When Roy Orbison recorded In Dreams, backed by lush strings and the Candymen, his vocal range pushed from a deep baritone up to a near falsetto. Stunning display that few singers could match, but we're talking about Roy Orbison here.
I can't help it. I can't help it.
The song became a top 10 hit, but it didn't fully reveal its strange power until decades later in 86 when director David Lynch resurrected In Dreams for that key scene in his cult classic Blue Velvet, where Dean Stockwell lip syncs it in a nightmarish moment that reintroduced the song to a whole new generation.
Dreams, I walk with you.
Now, Roy wasn't thrilled about how the song was used in the movie. That's what people say, but even he couldn't deny that the dream had returned hauntingly vivid as ever, as only David Lynch can prove, the late David Lynch. Before we get into number 9, I do want to say something. So, been doing these countdowns with lots of music coming through, and it's a battle all the time. And I just don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to do this with the music rights. I've got labels trying to take the video down. I have to put videos up multiple times, and it's just very frustrating. But it's something I really believe in, and so I'm going to keep pushing for it. But there are some days where I'm about to lose it, but I'm trying to figure out ways to do it in a different way to where I don't have to deal with this. We're trying to build bridges with labels and figure this out, because it only helps, bring nostalgia and bring the artist forward. So anyway, Just my 2 cents. Bear with me as I go through that. For our next song, we have Down, Down, Down into a Ring of Fire with Johnny Cash at number 9 on the top 10 of 63.
Love.
You know, Ring of Fire wasn't just a country and western hit. It was a blazing personal anthem wrapped in love, lust, guilt, and a mariachi horn section. The story behind it is just as fiery as the song itself. June Carter actually wrote this iconic song, comparing falling in love with a married man to falling into a ring of fire. Love is a burning thing, and it makes a fiery ring, bound by a wild desire.
Bound by wild desire.
June fell into a ring of fire, who happened to be the man in black, Mr. Johnny Cash. June was in the thick of a complicated and emotionally charged relationship with Mr. Cash. He was still married at the time and battling serious addiction, as you know if you've seen the movie. Now, she was both drawn to and tormented by the man in black. Overwhelmed by the feelings that he stirred up in her, June penned a poem about falling into a kind of emotional hell. A love so intense that it burned. She called it Ring of Fire, of course, and with help from songwriter Merle Kilgore, she shaped it into a full song and she offered it to Johnny. But Johnny didn't take to it right away. It was actually first recorded by June's sister Anita Carter in '62, originally titled Love's Ring of Fire.
Into the burning ring of fire.
But it flopped. Johnny told Anita he was going to give the song another shot. He liked it because June wrote it. But he waited. He didn't want to undercut her version right away. So once enough time had passed, Johnny marched into the studio in early 1963 and he laid down the version we all know and love. With the horns, the thumping rhythm, and his deep, smoky voice that led the emotional charge of the song. The mariachi-style brass was a huge departure for country music at that time, but Johnny had a gut feeling that it would work for the song, and he was right on the money. Ring of Fire by the great Johnny Cash was released in April 1963, and it exploded, spending 7 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Country Chart, and it rose to number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100 here. It became Johnny Cash's signature song, one of the most recognizable tracks in music history. Remarkably, it was a love song written by June about Johnny, sung by Johnny about June, while they were still living in the chaos of a love that neither of them could escape. You're still married. It was passion, it was pain, it was fate, all rolled into one unforgettable tune. June and Johnny became man and wife in March of '68. He actually proposed on stage in front of about 7,000 fans.
The ring of fire, the ring of fire.
All right, coming in at number 8, they say the neon lights are bright and there's always magic in the air on Broadway.
On Broadway. But when you're walking...
Man, great lyrics, magical lyrics from a true classic. It's easy to get caught up in the action and the spectacle, but Broadway can also be a mean street that will suck you in and spit you out. Ask Annie Starr. The legacy of On Broadway, that started with a young husband and wife songwriting team at Barry Mann and the late Cynthia Weil. This is what they told me about it. On Broadway. How do you talk about you guys without talking about On Broadway? I mean, it's just one of the great pop songs in the music canon. Tell me how that came together.
Carol and Jerry asked us to write. They were producing a group called The Cookies. And we had this song on Broadway.
Yeah.
We wrote for the Cookies. They say that life don't get you down the way it gets in this small town. I swear I gotta get me there someday. That was the original version of it.
The lyric, the first lyric, did that come kind of from your experience of in New York and that type of thing? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well,
lyrically.
I was always a Broadway fanatic, and I just envisioned these girls in a small town wanting to get to Broadway. And it was, it's so amazing now that our lives are encapsulated in a Broadway musical when Broadway was always my dream.
Yeah. And then Kirshner, who liked the song, he called up Lieber and Stoller. I didn't know this. We
didn't know.
I thought that we just went up to Lieber and Stoller because we heard that they were cutting the Drifters, and we felt the idea and the melody would have been right for them. And they really liked it. They said, but you got to rewrite the lyric. They said, because, it's a male group. So they said you could either go home and write it yourselves or you could write it with us.
We said, okay, let's all write it together.
They say that I won't last too long on Broadway.
if we got stuck on the first verse, we're missing a line. So let's go on to the next verse. And which is Cynthia
which is against my tight ass nature.
Yeah, she had to make sure the first verse was done. And
Absolutely.
Then, right. And so it was a great experience, and it turned into what it is, and they produced a great record.
I'll catch a greyhound.
Well, and George Benson. Oh my gosh.
Right.
I love his version. What did you think when you heard his version?
I couldn't believe it. It was incredible because it went on so long and it just kept getting better.
Yeah, it just kept building and building.
Because you could tell he felt that, man, when he was like, da-da-da-da-da, you know, and he's doing the whole,
Yeah, we have a lot to thank for him. Really, I mean, that he pushed the song totally over the line. It was great.
Yeah.
It's great. You know more about me than I know about me.
Yeah, you certainly know more about our
That's
records
true.
that we never knew about.
Yeah, fantastic.
Oh, no, I'm sure that's not true, but still.
Yes, absolutely.
It's sad that their heroes, Lieber and Stoller, would take advantage of them when the song was basically finished. It's sad to hear that. On Broadway, though, was one of the last songs by the Drifters to feature a lead vocal by Rudy Lewis, who died of a heart attack in 1964. The single traveled to number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 7 on the R&B chart. So next up on the top 10 songs of 63, it's a burning flame ignited by Martha Reeves and the Vandellas called Heatwave.
It's like a heat wave burning in my heart.
Heatwave was the first top 10 hit for Martha and the Vandellas. Of course, she started out as a secretary at Motown. And she started singing, as tapes would come in. And Barry heard her singing and was like, man, you got a great voice. Let's do some backgrounds. And all of a sudden, she was a star. Heatwave was another smash in the canon of Holland Dozier Holland, one of the greatest writing teams ever, Motown. Martha told me some really cool stuff behind this song, and as did Lamont Dozier. Here it is. One of my favorite songs of all time, Heatwave.
That was my warm-up song to get me started for the rest of the day, about 9 o'clock. And dun, dun, dun. And Martha, again, the right sound, and she had everything that the song needed.
I wanted to dance with everybody, and here comes Eddie Holland. I got this record I want you to sing. I want to stay at the party. And then I thought, this is Holland Dozier Holland.
Yep.
I better go. So I said, okay. He starts singing Love is Like a Heat Wave. And I loved his voice. And I emulated him to the T. The fire that you hear me singing with is what I heard from Eddie's voice. Brian worked with the backup singers. And if you listen to it real good, you'll hear Brian singing with us. And Lamont basically played the piano, and he would add little bits and things and bits of flavor, but they worked together great as a team. To have those good-looking men ask me to sing a song, I was beside myself, and I gave it all I could give it.
I can't explain it, don't understand it. I ain't never felt like this before.
Heatwave was red hot in 1963. It went to number 1 on the R&B chart and number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100.
Don't you know that I feel it burning right here.
Of course, Linda Ronstadt lit the fire again in 75 with her rendition going to number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. As a countdown to the top 10 of 63 rolls on, we're hip to one of the most innocent and controversial hits of that year. At number 6, I got Puff the Magic Dragon by Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Puff the magic dragon lived by the sea.
It all started in 1959, where a college student at Cornell University named Leonard Lipton was playing around with ideas inspired by Ogden Nash's poetry, particularly a 1936 poem by Nash titled The Tale of Custard the Dragon. Leonard sat down at his typewriter, had his friend Peter Yarrow with him, and he wrote a short poem about a little boy named Jackie Paper and his imaginary dragon friend, who was named Puff, who lived by the sea in the mythical land of Honolulu.
Frolicked in the autumn mist in a land called Honolulu.
Leonard never really thought of it much again, but Peter Yarrow, who went on to form the legendary folk trio Peter, Paul, and Mary, did. Actually, a few years later, Peter turned that poem into a song, adding a melody and fleshing out the lyrics. And then the trio recorded it in 1962 and released it in 63. And when they did, Puff the Magic Dragon became a runaway hit It actually went all the way to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became an instant classic, especially among children.
Sing it now. Puff the magic dragon.
The song is a gentle, bittersweet tale of childhood innocence and the inevitable passage of time. Jackie Paper grows up, leaves Puff behind, and the dragon is left alone in his cave, no longer summoned by the imagination of a child.
Without his lifelong friend, Puff could not be brave.
On the surface, it's a touching metaphor about, getting older, growing older, and losing the magic of childhood. However, not everyone interpreted the song that way, of course. By the late 60s, rumors began to swirl that Puff the Magic Dragon was just a coded reference to marijuana use. According to the urban legends, Puff referring to smoking, Jackie Paper was a nod to rolling papers, and Honolulu was a mythical land of highs. And as we've heard, dragons breathe smoke, so of course, it had to be about smoking weed, right?
The magic dragon lived by the...
Well, that theory, it spread like wildfire, fueled by the counterculture movement of the time and the general public's tendency to read between the lines of popular songs, thinking every song was about doobies, smoking doobies. But Peter Yarrow has repeatedly said that the song has never had anything to do with drugs. He was deeply upset that something that was meant to represent the beauty and sadness of childhood's end and innocence had been twisted into a drug reference.
Jackie Paper came no more, and Puff...
Leonard Lipton was even more blunt. He once said, when people find out the truth, they're actually disappointed. It's a song about innocence lost, not pot. Despite the denials, sadly, the myth still persists, and because of it, the song has faced its share of bans and controversy. It's a children's song, come on.
In a land called Honolulu.
Now, there were no theories about hidden meanings for the number 5 song on our countdown of the top 10 of 63. Got the Young Love classic, Our Day Will Come by Ruby and the Romantics.
Our day will come.
Our day will come and we'll have everything. To be young. This song, so innocent, so great, was written by the very accomplished collaboration of Bob Hilliard and Mort Garson. They wanted established singer Jack Jones to sing the song, actually. He was a crooner. They thought his easy listening croon would fit the mood of this tune.
Roses and lollipops.
But they eventually agreed to allow Ruby and the Romantics, an unknown quintet from Ohio, to record it, with the promise that if the version by the unrecognized group failed, that Cup Records would then record a version with Jones. Jack Jones, like I said. The Ruby in the group was Ruby Nash. She delivered an inspired lead vocal, just dreamy, and the guys backed her up with some incredible background harmony.
You have everything.
The day definitely came for Ruby and the Romantics. Sorry, dad joke there. They had a smashing debut with their first single. Our Day Will Come became number 1 of the Billboard Hot 100, as well as the R&B chart, effectively denying Jack Jones the chance to record it. Jack would go on to sing a variety of middle-of-the-road standards, and he went on to sing the Love Boat theme, probably his most famous.
Love boat, soon will be made.
Riding in at number 4 on our countdown of the top 10 songs on 1963, I've got the Beach Boys with Surfin' USA.
Blonde hairdo, Surfin' USA.
Like many of his peers, one artist Brian Wilson really admired was Chuck Berry, the founding father of rock and roll. Berry's clever lyrics, his sharp guitar riffs, and rhythmic drive had a huge influence on this young genius. So one day, Brian sat down to write a song that would capture the energy of the surfing culture of Southern California while borrowing the irresistible groove of Chuck Berry's 1958 hit Sweet Little 16.
They're really rocking in Boston and Pittsburgh, PA.
Honestly, saying that Brian Wilson borrowed the groove from Chuck Berry is putting it mildly. Brian just couldn't help himself. He loved Chuck's song so much. He actually used the exact melody for Surfin' USA. He just basically put new lyrics over Chuck's song. So when Surfin' USA was released in March of 63, it was a big one. Shot to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became the Beach Boys' breakout national hit.
Everybody's gone surfing, Surfin' USA.
Of course, it didn't take long for people to recognize the tune. Chuck Berry's publisher certainly noticed right off the bat, and his lawyers came a-calling. The music was Chuck's, even if the lyrics were brand new. Rather than take it to court, though, the parties reached a settlement, and from that point on, Chuck Berry was given full songwriting credit on Surfing USA, even though Brian Wilson had written the lyrics. But it's probably pretty fair there, because he just put new lyrics over the melody. Brian wasn't upset in the slightest, though. He always considered it a tribute anyway. He never meant to plagiarize. When Brian wrote the lyrics, he was only a teenager and didn't have a clue about publishing laws back then. But the song's legacy didn't suffer at all. Surfing USA wanted to become one of the definitive surf rock anthems and a cornerstone of the Beach Boys' identity. The California Myth helped kick off a national surf craze, even among people who had never seen the ocean. Even though the only Beach Boy that ever actually tried surfing was Dennis, Brian Wilson never did for sure. The countdown of the top 10 songs of 63 continues with some fatherly advice. Walk Like a Man, My Son at number 3. Here comes the Four Seasons. In early 63, the Four Seasons were on a hot streak like no other. They'd already scored hits with Cherry and Big Girls Don't Cry. And their signature sound, tight harmonies, doo-wop flair, and Frankie Valli's impossible falsetto was dominating the charts. Then came Walk Like a Man, a tough guy track written by the powerhouse team of Bob Crew, the group's producer and lyricist, and Bob Gaudio, wrapped in those wonderful Four Seasons harmonies. Ah. But behind the scenes, recording that hit was anything but slick. In fact, it was a harrowing experience. According to legend, the day they were recording Walk Like a Man at the Stave Phillips studio in New York, a big fire broke out in the building. It wasn't small. It was blazing. Smoke was billowing into the recording booth while they were laying down their vocals. Most sane people would have evacuated immediately like everybody else did, but not Bob Crew. Bob was so locked in, he was so obsessed with getting the perfect take that he barricaded the studio door and refused to stop recording, even as the smoke got thicker and thicker. People were shouting, and the fire department was on its way. And then there's Bob Crew defiantly waving everyone off, yelling, keep singing, we got it. So they did, not knowing if Walk Like a Man, Talk Like a Man would turn into Die Like a Man.
Oh, how you tried to cut me down to size.
That literal fiery performance on Walk Like a Man gave Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons their third straight chart topper on the Billboard Hot 100. It's so sad what's happened with Frankie Valli. I keep seeing videos of him up there where he freezes. It's kind of elder abuse, really. Have you seen this? Yeah, talk about harrowing. It's horrible. All right, at number 2 on the top 10 songs on 1963 Countdown, it's one of the most influential tracks of the rock era. Got Be My Baby by the Ronettes. It was only 4 beats, but man, those 4 beats changed pop music forever. That now iconic intro to Be My Baby announced the arrival of something groundbreaking. It was the sound of teenage longing. It was the sound of heartbreak. It was the sound of romance, all wrapped into 3 minutes of musical perfection. Be My Baby was written by Phil Spector, Jeff Berry, and Ellie Greenwich, one of the great brill-building songwriting teams for sure. Phil Spector, the mastermind behind the Wall of Sound, wanted this to be his ultimate masterpiece, and so it was. So when he brought in the Ronettes into Gold Star Studios in LA, he pulled out all the stops. The room was packed with musicians, many of them members of the legendary Wrecking Crew. He layered instruments upon instruments, from pianos to castanets to strings to hand claps, you name it. At one point, Hal Blaine, the drummer, played that famous beat by accident during rehearsal. That's pretty cool. Phil Spector stopped everything and he shouted, "That's it! That's gonna be the beginning." The magic of Be My Baby came alive in the vocal stylings of the Ronettes, though, led by the mesmerizing voice of the late Veronica Ronnie Bennett, later Ronnie Spector. Ronnie had the perfect mix of innocence and attitude in her voice, part longing, part rebellion. It's still unbelievable to me that Ronnie's vocal was delivered in a single take.
The night we met, I knew I
Be My Baby was the world's introduction to Phil Spector's wall of sound. A wall of sound that would, influence so many things. Billy Joel, Say Goodbye to Hollywood, Born to Run, Bruce Springsteen. I could go on and on and on. Everybody wanted that Phil Spector sound. Even Hall of Fame artists like Brian Wilson, he was blown away by it. He actually told me the first time that he heard Be My Baby and the impact it had on his young years. Here's what he said. Tell me about when you first heard Be My Baby.
Well, I had to pull over the side of the road. I could not believe, what I was hearing. I never heard anything like it in my life. So I pulled over and listened to it, and I absolutely couldn't believe it. I was like flabbergasted. The wall of sound, yeah. Then I bought the record, Be My Baby, and I learned I listened for drum beats and guitars and pianos, and I learned how to combine one instrument with another to get a third sound, Piano, guitar, which makes one sound. Instead of piano and a guitar, it's piano and guitar. Right, that did inspire Don't Worry Baby, yeah.
At the time of the creation of Be My Baby, Phil Spector was dealing with turmoil in his personal life, including a troubled marriage. He actually developed a growing romantic interest in Ronnie Bennett that would prove to be abusive, and it destroyed her career for almost 2 decades. Be My Baby captivated listeners around the globe. It blasted to number 4 in the UK, number 2 in New Zealand, Canada, and it went to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. It should have been a number 1 hit. All right, my friends, it's time to announce a song we chose as the number 1 song on 1963. For me, it was a no-brainer. It's a track that intrigued everyone, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Number 1 on our top 10 of 63 is Louie Louie by the Kingsmen. In the early 60s, a scrappy band from Portland, Oregon called the Kingsmen entered a small studio to record a song that would become one of the most iconic and controversial rock tracks of all time. Isn't it funny how these things happen? Louie Louie, the song itself, it wasn't new. It was written in 1955 by Richard Berry. Inspired by a Caribbean-style rhythm and the sea shanty vibe of El Loco Cha-Cha. Berry's version was a first-person tell of a lovesick Jamaican sailor longing to return to his girl. Fine little girl, she wait for me. It was a sweet and innocent little ditty, but when the Kingsmen got a hold of it, something extraordinary and truly chaotic happened. Now, the recording session for Louie Louie for the Kingsmen, it was really rushed. It was really rough. Lead singer Jack Ely had just had his braces tightened, and he had to shout the lyrics into a cheap mic, which was hung way too high above his head. The result was a gloriously slurred, nearly indecipherable vocal performance that sounded raw, rebellious, and borderline dangerous, if you ask certain people. Because Jack's vocal was so hard to understand, rumors started to swirl that the song was filled with obscene lyrics. Teenagers traded handwritten interpretations of the real words, full of 4-letter vulgarities and sexual innuendo. Parents were outraged. Radio stations started banning the song. Teachers confiscated records. Politicians got involved as well. The buzz got so intense that in 1964, the FBI actually launched a full investigation into Louie Louie. Yes, that's right, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the same people who tracked mobsters and spies back then. They spent over 2 years trying to figure out what the Kingsmen were really saying. They thought it would corrupt America's youth into a mutiny. They analyzed the recording at various speeds. They played it backwards, they played it forwards. They even interviewed parents and teachers, never interviewed the band, I don't know why. Their conclusion was that the part of the song in question was unintelligible, really at any speed. That was the actual phrase from the FBI's report. You can read it, it's online. After 455 pages of interviews and analysis, the FBI couldn't find a single trace of obscenity in the song. Things even more ridiculous, though, the band didn't even know about this investigation until years later. Jack Ely insisted all along that he just sung the original lyrics that were pretty much what Richard Berry had written. But the poor audio quality turned it into a Rorschach test for teenage rebellion. The band was vindicated about the obscenity allegations, but then decades later, it turns out there actually was a major profanity on the final recording by the Kingsmen. Len Easton, the drummer, yelled the F word after dropping his drumstick at about 54 seconds into the recording session. This profanity was captured by the microphone, and it can be heard if you listen really closely. Somehow the FBI missed it. Surprise there. Back in 1963, teenagers heard what they wanted to hear, and honestly, not much has changed in the decades since then. Louie Louie wasn't just a radio hit, though. It became a full-blown teen party anthem, one of the greatest songs ever, one of the greatest party songs for sure, especially after John Belushi famously belted it out in the comic classic Animal House. It earned a permanent spot on the playlist at frat houses and toga parties everywhere after that. Over time, Louie Louie took on a life of its own. It's widely considered the most covered rock song in history, with thousands of versions recorded across genres. Its raw three-chord energy helped lay the foundation for both punk rock and grunge decades later. The love for the song runs so deep that April 11th, Richard Berry's birthday, is now celebrated as International Louie Louie Day. And in one of the wildest tributes ever, 754 guitarists came together in Tacoma, Washington on August 24, 2003 to play it simultaneously at the aptly named Louie Fest. Not bad for a song that the FBI once thought might be corrupting the youth of America. Also, there are a lot of radio stations that have played it a ton. I remember when our radio station was switching over to a different format, they played it for a week straight, 24 hours a day, different versions. I've heard other people tell me the same thing. So that's our countdown to 63. I also got to throw out a little bit of a shout out to Hey Paula, Paul and Paula. What a song.
Hey, Paula, I wanna marry you.
Anyway, if you like our content, we invite you to subscribe below. Let's have a great discussion about 1963. Boy, I'll tell you what, when the Beatles came in, it rocked the world. 63, still a great year, but usually I've got about 50 songs on the list to narrow down. This time I only had about 25. So, you know, those earlier years, there's a lot of novelty songs and such on there. But should we do 62? Maybe we should do 60 to 62 and 55 to 59. You let me know what you think. If you like our content, like I said, subscribe. Love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.